Hey everybody, and welcome back to History Student Reacts. Today we will be watching Belisarius Plague by Epic History TV. So, in the last two episodes of this series, we witnessed the reconquest of Italy by Belisarius, and also sort of the tensions between Belisarius, the talented and popular general, and Justinian, the ambitious emperor. In this episode, we're kind of getting into the emergence of some new issues that will draw Belisarius away from Italy and back home. So yeah, I'm excited to get into this one. I hope you guys enjoy this. If you do, please check out the Patreon. We've got exclusive content on there. So yeah, let's jump right into it.
540 AD. Khosrow, Sassanid king of Persia, is invading the Eastern Roman Empire. His huge army marches along the banks of the Euphrates River.
I don't know too much about Khosrow or Khusro, but I've heard he's a pretty interesting figure in his own right. He's a competent rival to Justinian. He's an accomplished ruler in his own right. So maybe we'll get into that one day. I'm not sure if there's any videos on him, but he does sound like a pretty interesting guy from what I've heard.
Sura falls before them. Hierapolis is ransomed for 2,000 pounds of silver.
Wow.
Berea burns. Then, to the horror of all Romans, Khosrow takes Antioch, second city of the empire, the Roman capital of the Near East. The city burns. Soldiers flee. Civilians are massacred.
Jeez.
The historian Procopius writes, "I become dizzy as I write about such a great calamity, and transmit it to future times to remember."
Well, I'm glad you did write about it, Procopius. All of this destruction, the Romans are losing so badly in the East. I mean, in this situation, there's one man we've got to call on. We need Belisarius. He's the one man who can do the job. There was a long-time rivalry between the Romans and the Persians, and the Persian Empire would go under several different names, as would the Roman Empire. And this was, I believe, sort of a high point for the Persians. They are really into Roman territory. They're getting victory after victory. They're conquering cities, important cities too. And the Romans are, they're really feeling it right now. They need a W, and, there's one man to call on.
I cannot understand why it should be God's will to exalt the fortunes of a man or place, and then to obliterate them for no cause that is apparent to us. After years of victories, Justinian's empire is rocked by this devastating onslaught.
Yeah.
The emperor can send only his cousin Germanus and 300 soldiers, with a promise of a great army to follow. But there is no great army. Roman forces are tied down fighting Justinian's wars in the west.
And this sort of raises the question of sort of the merits of Justinian's ambition, because you get to a situation like this where Roman troops are really badly needed in the east, and Justinian has so many troops tied down in the west because of his great ambitious reconquests of Africa and Italy, that he's got himself into a lot of trouble. And this is where the debate arises of how successful Justinian actually was, and this will this sort of tension will continue after his death, because he's left a lot of obligations for the emperors that follow that they cannot fulfill. At least that's sort of my opinion. I think Justinian was too ambitious for his own good, and a lot of his goals, even goals that he accomplished, would sort of come back to bite the empire because he was too ambitious and committed too many resources. We're seeing a little bit of that here, but this will continue past his death.
Instead, he will dispatch his greatest general, Belisarius, and pray for a miracle, little knowing that the empire is about to be plunged into an even greater catastrophe, unlike anything the world has ever seen before.
Yeah. Yep, it's gonna get even worse for the Romans.
First, a big thanks to our video sponsor, Endel.
Alright, shout out to Epic History TV and their sponsor. Please go and check out their video. I've linked it down below. Please check out their sponsor. I'm going to partially skip through this, but, please go and check that out. We want to give respect to the original creators and their sponsors and, let them make money off of their videos. So, yeah, please go check that out, guys.
Or even all three. Endel is and its AI create sleep. Find they can often video description will get a free week of audio experiences.
Go check out their video.
Thanks
and
again to Endel
their sponsor,
for
which is
sponsoring this
linked in the
video.
description of their video.
Trouble had been brewing on Justinian's eastern frontier for years. The Eastern Roman and Sassanid empires, the two great powers of the Middle East, had signed a treaty of eternal peace just 8 years before.
Yeah, eternal.
But Khosrow had looked on with growing alarm as Roman forces, led by Belisarius, had reconquered first North Africa, then Italy. Half in jest, Khosrow asks Justinian for his share of the tribute, since these victories are only possible because he's granted the Romans peace. But the joke is wearing thin. Khosrow receives envoys from the Goths in Italy and the Armenians, who beg him for aid.
I always thought that was an interesting fact. It's kind of crazy to think that, we have the Goths in Italy making the trek all the way to Persia, modern-day Iran, to beg Khosrow for help. I mean, that is quite a distance to go. And we're seeing, the politics of the situation are really, wide-ranging. They're really affecting a wide area of land, due to the, expanse of the Roman Empire, which, Justinian's trying to reconquer all the lost territory, and the power of the Persians. So it's just kind of interesting to think about how, the conquest of Italy connect with, the conflict with the Persians in the east.
Justinian, they tell him, has conceived the desire of seizing the entire earth. He will march against the Persians with those he has already enslaved, respecting neither the name of friendship nor any of his sworn promises. In 540, Khosrow accuses the Eastern Emperor of paying Huns to raid Persian land and trying to bribe his Arab allies to switch sides. Then he attacks.
Here we go.
Justinian has stripped the frontier of its best troops to reinforce his army in Italy.
Yep.
There is no Roman force that can stand up to Khosrow's invasion. Antioch is sacked. Survivors are enslaved and sent to Persia. Khosrow then marches to the coast and symbolically bathes in the waters of the Mediterranean.
That's got to be a pretty satisfying moment if you're Khosrow. You've made it to the Mediterranean, bathing in the waters. Symbolic. You're saying, I'm here. We're back at the Mediterranean. We have reached sort of, the Roman realm of influence, because Rome had dominated the Mediterranean for a long time at this point, and Khosrow is saying, I'm here, I'm here to conquer, and you can't stop me. So that's got to be a pretty good moment for him, personally.
He moves on to Apamea, where he demands 1,000 pounds of silver, but lets the priests keep their piece of the true cross. He then fixes the local chariot race, so that Justinian's favorite team, the Blues, lose.
So petty.
Justinian agrees to pay Khosrow 5,000 pounds of gold, with 500 more to be paid annually, in exchange for a truce. Satisfied, Khosrow sets off for home.
Now that is a lot of gold, and, although the Romans don't want to see it this way, that's kind of a tribute. That is basically like the Romans paying a tribute to the Persians which is, that is deeply humiliating. That's a humiliating thing to imagine for the Romans. Because, they're supposed to be on the top of the world. They're the greatest empire, the greatest civilization in the world. Because they are, the Romans, they know their history. And also, they're a Christian empire. And they also feel like that puts them above everyone else. And so, this is a humiliating position to be in.
However, he does not let the truce prevent him from extorting several more payments en route.
Yep.
It is the Eastern Roman Empire's greatest military humiliation in 3 centuries. Everyone was talking about Belisarius. He was credited with 2 victories such as never before fallen to the lot of one man. He had brought 2 kings captive to Constantinople, and beyond all expectation, had made Roman spoils of the nations and wealth of Geseric and Theodoric. In the Eastern Roman capital, Belisarius has been welcomed back from Italy as a hero. He and his entourage draw admiring crowds wherever they go.
Rightfully so.
But he does not have long to enjoy his success. In early 541, Justinian sends Belisarius east to take command of Roman forces in Syria and ensure there is no repeat of the previous year's disaster. Belisarius's wife, Antonina, has accompanied him on previous campaigns to North Africa and Italy and proved herself a valuable advisor and deputy. But this time, she remains in Constantinople to advise her friend and patron, Empress Theodora. Belisarius gathers all available forces at Dara, site of his great victory 11 years before. He has his own household.
Yeah, I imagine that the link between Belisarius' wife Antonina and Justinian's wife Theodora was probably pretty valuable to Belisarius. I'm sure that was important in sort of getting him in the emperor's good graces, particularly given that there was a lot of tension between the 2 men. And this also kind of shows you that, despite Justinian's concerns about Belisarius and his suspicions about Belisarius and Belisarius' ambitions, there's really no one else he can send. He has to send Belisarius to do this, even if he believes, it might risk Belisarius usurping him, which, I don't think Belisarius would have done, but that's what Justinian worries about. But Belisarius is so invaluable that there's no one else who can do the job. There really isn't. He is that good. And thus should be remembered for his talents and, competence throughout his career, honestly.
Old troops, the elite Bucellari, Ostrogoths who've joined him in Italy, Rome's Hassanid Arab allies, led by Al-Harith, and several thousand Limitani, the empire's frontier troops. Procopius does not tell us the size of these forces, so we can only make educated guesses based on circumstantial evidence. Local Roman forces are shaken by the events of the previous year. Belisarius spends several weeks reorganizing these men, re-equipping them, and rebuilding their shattered morale. When Belisarius learns that Khosrow and the main Persian army are far away in the north, campaigning in Lazica, he decides to go on the offensive and targets the Persian city of Nisibis. This fortified frontier city is too strong to assault directly, but Belisarius hopes the garrison can be lured out and defeated in battle, allowing his troops to rush into the city, mingled with the retreating enemy. Belisarius camps 5 miles from Nisibis, close enough to tempt the Persians to attack, but far enough that they can't easily retreat back to the city. But one Roman commander, Peter, camps far too close. Worse, he ignores Belisarius' warning to be on high alert at noon, when the Persians are most likely to strike.
Come on, Peter.
The Persian commander, Nabidis, spots this isolated Roman force and attacks.
Once again, we are seeing insubordination hurt Belisarius's situation. We saw the same thing in Italy, where Belisarius is, he's cautious, but he is correct in his caution. It saves him many times. And his subordinates refuse to obey orders, and then it puts Belisarius in a tricky situation. I mentioned it last time, but it's honestly pretty frustrating to see. You feel bad for Belisarius. He's got everything under control, and then his men go and disobey his orders. And I don't know how this is going to turn out. This particular battle, maybe Belisarius will be able to handle it well, but it's still kind of annoying to see all the insubordination that he has to deal with on a semi-frequent basis.
Peter immediately sends a rider to Belisarius calling for aid. But Belisarius and the rest of the army have already seen what's happening and are on their way.
Okay.
Before they can reach Peter, his force is hit by the Persian cavalry. After a brief fight, his troops scatter. 50 men are killed. A Roman standard is lost. When Belisarius arrives with reinforcements, he drives off the Persians, who retreat into the city, leaving behind more than 100 dead. But the loss of a Roman standard in such a pointless skirmish is a bitter blow.
Yeah.
Belisarius marches on to the Persian fort at Caesarion. His first attack is repelled. He digs in for a siege, while ordering Al-Harith's Arabs and 1,200 Bukhilari to cross the Tigris River and raid deep into Assyria. It has been many years since the Romans have raided this far into Persian territory. There is little resistance and much plunder. Caesarion runs out of food and surrenders to Belisarius.
So, the Persians managed to get fairly deep into Roman territory and, loot, raid, extract bounty from all these different cities. And, now the Romans are doing the same thing. Because both are these massive empires that are equally unable to defend all of their territory. They have these big armies that can face off against one another, and if the army is there, then obviously they can defend the territory in their immediate proximity, but both of these empires have just a ton of land to defend, and they can't defend all of it. So the Romans are, kind of coming to the Persians and saying, okay, you want to raid our land? Well, we'll do the same to you, because you face some of the same issues we do, and we know you can't defend it all. So take this. So, they're kind of giving them one back.
But the Roman general has run out of time. His troops are exhausted by the extreme summer heat, and a third are sick. His Limitani wish to return to their homes, now threatened by the start of the Arab raiding season. While Al-Harith and his men have gone AWOL. It later emerges they've ridden straight home to avoid sharing their loot with the Romans. Belisarius, having achieved as much as he can with his limited force, withdraws back into Roman territory.
Yeah, once again, the insubordination of men under Belisarius is harming him. And we can also see here sort of a difference in how Belisarius deals with foreign territory versus Roman territory, because when we saw him reconquering Africa and Italy, he was always very careful not to loot, not to raid, to treat the locals fairly, because they were Romans, and they were being reincorporated into the Roman Empire. Versus in this situation, where he's going into Persian territory, there's really no regard for the people there. There's looting, there's raiding, there's all this kind of stuff that Belisarius usually tries to avoid, because I suppose he doesn't feel beholden to the people in the Persian Empire, as he did to the people in Italy and Africa, very intelligently, because, he knew he had to build that popular support so that the Romans would be accepted in their leadership role.
At the opening of spring, Khosrow, son of Kavad, for the third time began an invasion into the land of the Romans with a large army, keeping the Euphrates River on the right. The Emperor Justinian, upon learning of the inroad of the Persians, sent Belisarius against them once more. 542 AD. Belisarius spends the winter in Constantinople. But in early spring, news arrives that Khosrow is preparing to invade again. Belisarius races back to the Eastern Front, using horses of the famous Cursus Publicus, the Roman postal service, with fresh remounts at every stage.
Wow.
A journey that normally takes a month can be completed in around 8 days. Local commanders warn that Khosrow is approaching with the biggest army yet. They want to hole up in Hierapolis and hide behind its strong walls. Belisarius has a different plan. If Khosrow were attacking any other people but Romans, this plan of yours would be safe and sensible. But as immediately after leaving here, this barbarian plans to fall upon some other territory of the Emperor, be assured that to die bravely would be better in every way than to be saved without a fight.
Yeah, so once again, we're seeing his sort of care for the people of Rome, which I was just talking about. In this instance, he's saying, look, we can hide behind the walls and we'll save ourselves, but all Khosrow's going to do is he's going to go attack a different city of Romans. So we've gained nothing, we're just still losing Roman lives. And yeah, I think he's right in that. From his perspective, he's saying, look, I came here to fight the Persians and save Romans. And, us protecting ourselves isn't going to do that. So we're going to have to take a stand. So, yeah, I definitely get that. I do.
For this would justly be called not salvation, but treason. So come as quickly as possible to Europos, where, after collecting the whole army, I hope to deal with the enemy as God permits. Khosrow is counting on another lucrative plundering expedition. This time he plans to raid Palestine and pillage Jerusalem. But when he hears Belisarius himself has arrived and is gathering a Roman army at Europos, he hesitates. He sends an envoy, Abandanes, to meet Belisarius on the pretext of reopening negotiations, but really to gauge his strength. For almost the first time in 10 years, Procopius is not at Belisarius' side.
Wow.
He has remained in Constantinople. In fact, his days of campaigning with the great Roman general are over. Nonetheless, he provides a detailed description of what follows. Belisarius meets Khosrow's envoy far from the Roman camp, surrounded by an imposing number of his most fearsome warriors, including Thracians, Illyrians, Goths, and Vandals. They have been hand-picked to make an impression. All are tall, strongly built men, armed to the teeth, and seem completely unconcerned by the arrival of a Persian envoy.
I love that. Belisarius knows he has to make an impression. He's like, gather up the toughest men and have them stand around threateningly. That's kind of funny. And also, we're seeing Belisarius' reputation is preceding him. Khosrow is hesitating to, continue his plans because he knows Belisarius is here. He knows of Belisarius, and that makes him hesitate. So Belisarius' reputation alone is doing some work in this situation.
Belisarius himself speaks in a carefree manner. This course that Khosrow has chosen is not how men usually behave. If other men have a dispute with their neighbor, they first try to negotiate with him, and only go to war if they do not receive satisfaction. But he first comes into the midst of the Romans, and then makes suggestions about peace. With that, Belisarius dismisses the envoy.
Wow.
The envoy returns to Khosrow and urges the king to avoid battle at all costs. The enemy are not like any men he's seen before. They are formidable and disciplined, Their commander is wise and imposing. The king should withdraw as soon as possible.
Okay, so it seems like Belisarius really made the intended impression. I mean, he did exactly what he intended to do. Once again, we're seeing that, Belisarius is not just a talented military leader. He's also a good leader of men. He's, good at the politics of the situation, He's good at putting a message across, communicating things to people. And we haven't seen him do it in this context before, but, the skills are transferable. So we're seeing, how skilled and competent Belisarius really is in sort of many different arenas.
Khosrow takes his advice. The Persian army crosses the Euphrates and marches home.
Fair enough.
Belisarius appears to have bluffed a stronger enemy into retreat and saved huge swathes of the empire from plunder and pillage.
Nice. Very nice.
According to Procopius, the Romans praised Belisarius. He seemed to have achieved greater glory in their eyes by this feat than when he brought Gelimer or Vitiges captive to Constantinople. In truth, it was an achievement of great importance and deserving great praise, at a time when all the Romans were hiding in terror behind their defenses. Belisarius and his Bucellari, putting on a show that is so intimidating and deceptive that the Persian king abandons his campaign. It's a famous and memorable scene. But did it ever happen?
Oh, I just got baited. I mean, I totally took their word for it. I guess we're about to see now if this is actually accurate. Of course, with a lot of Roman history, there are questions about the accuracy of the, of what we get passed down, because a lot of ancient historians were not entirely honest. A lot of times we see sort of similar trends throughout Roman history, sort of familiar stories that pop up again and again, because, a lot of Roman historians wanted to, sort of mold history into a recognizable, familiar story, which makes it entertaining. As we just saw, this was very entertaining, but it may not be entirely accurate. So I guess we're about to get sort of the lowdown on the questions over the accuracy of this situation.
Many historians believe that something even more terrifying caused Khosrow's rapid withdrawal. He'd discovered the empire was riddled with plague.
Yes. I was wondering when we were going to get into the plague. So that is going to be another big part of Justinian's reign. The effects of the plague, but, we're just about to get into that.
During these times, there was a pestilence, which came close to wiping out the whole of mankind. Now, in the case of all other scourges sent from heaven, some explanation or cause might be given by daring men. But for this calamity, it is quite impossible either to express in words or to conceive in thought any explanation, except, indeed, to refer it to God. The 6th century world is full of strange and mysterious phenomena. Sometimes even a highly educated man like Procopius can only record his observations and trust in God. Of the year 536, he wrote, "It came about during this year that a most dread portent took place. The whole year the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, and it seemed much like an eclipse, for its beams were not clear, nor like those it usually makes. From the time when this thing happened, men were free neither from war, nor pestilence, nor any other thing that brings death."
Oh, wow.
Experts now believe Procopius was observing the atmospheric aftermath of a massive volcanic eruption.
This is sort of an interesting facet of history, is that obviously throughout history, most civilizations would not have understood phenomena like this that we can now look at with our sort of scientific knowledge and understand what was really going on. And so as historians, we have to look through primary sources and look at these stories and events, how they've been described, often as an act of God, or the gods, or the spirits, or, different supernatural causes, depending on what society you're looking at. And we have to try and work out, okay, what exactly are they referring to? We have to parse out, the real objective details from their perspective. And, you have a good example here where Procopius does not understand at all what is happening. And, people would not have understood this phenomena except by just saying, well, it must be some act of God. And then we have to take that and sort of work out what exactly is going on here. This is a common theme throughout the vast majority of history.
In fact, a cluster of volcanic activity around this date would help to trigger what's become known as the Late Antique Little Ice Age. Its impact is impossible to measure, but it may have contributed to food shortages and worsened the famine that Procopius witnessed in Italy. Such shortages made the population weaker and more vulnerable to what came next. It originated among the Egyptians who live in Pelusium. From there it branched out in two directions. The first moving to Alexandria and then the rest of Egypt. The second coming to the Palestinians who live by the border of Egypt. Plague is first recorded in the Nile Delta in 541. It spreads across Egypt and into coastal Palestine. In spring 542, it reaches the imperial capital, Constantinople.
And one of the reasons this plague was so bad was that it was able to spread so, effectively due to, Byzantine transportation. This is a well-developed empire, has well-developed lines of trade and military. There's lots of ways to travel. So this facilitates the travel of the plague. In many other places, it wasn't as bad as it was in the Eastern Roman Empire because travel was far less effective. I mean, we see this with modern plagues such as the Spanish flu or COVID. We have such a connected world, and travel is so efficient, quick, and easy that these plagues spread very quickly. And we see sort of a similar thing with the Eastern Roman Empire. Their effective lines of trade and communication would come back to hurt them because it also allowed the plague to spread quickly.
It spreads rapidly across the empire. In 543, plague reaches Persian-ruled Armenia and the Kingdom of the Franks. Recently, plague victims have even been identified in Anglo-Saxon England. Procopius is in Constantinople when the plague strikes with full, terrifying force. They fell ill in the following way. Suddenly they became feverish. Some of them when they rose from sleep, others while they walked about or doing any small thing. The body did not change color or become warm like a regular fever, nor did it burn up. Rather, at first, the fever was so mild that it gave no cause for alarm, either to victims or the doctors who treated them. But then on the same day or the next, a bubonic swelling appeared. This happened around the groin, also inside the armpit, sometimes by the ears or the thigh. Some victims, Procopius writes, fall into a coma-like state, unable to feed or care for themselves. Others are seized by madness, shouting wildly and running into the streets. Some died immediately, others after many days. In some cases, the body blossomed with dark pustules about the size of a lentil. These people did not survive a single day. They all died immediately. Many others suddenly began to vomit blood and perished immediately. I must also state that the most eminent doctors predicted that many would die who shortly afterwards were unexpectedly free of all sickness. They also claimed that many would survive who were destined to perish almost immediately. Thus there was no cause behind this disease that any human reason could grasp. For in all cases, the outcome made little sense.
Right. Now, just think of being a person, you know, during this time period. You don't have much understanding of disease or how it spreads. And now you're in a situation where the people around you are randomly falling ill, some of them with pretty horrific symptoms. Some of them are going mad and running around the streets. Some are just dying seemingly randomly, out of nowhere. And a lot of people are dying. I mean, this has got to seem, frankly, apocalyptic to you. I mean, your main frame of understanding the world is likely a Christian one, an Orthodox Christian way of understanding the world. You know, your religion is important. And so this would seem like some horrible punishment from God. You know, perhaps this is the end times. Maybe we've reached the end of the world, the apocalypse. You know, this would seem horrifying and world-ending to you. I mean, you know, we've all lived through COVID, and we didn't see it the same way. But you know, if you think back to when COVID was first beginning, you know, many of us were like, man, what's happening? How bad is this going to be? We don't know when we didn't understand it. You know, we didn't know what was happening. You know, we thought, oh, well, this could be really, really bad. And now think about dealing with that, but with no modern understanding. You know, you would be extremely frightened and, you know, you would think the end times were probably here.
DNA analysis of human remains from this and later pandemics has identified the cause of this terrifying disease, a deadly bacterium called Yersinia pestis. Procopius is at the center of the world's first bubonic plague pandemic.
Yeah.
The second, 8 centuries later, is known as the Black Death. The peak of the pandemic lasts 3 months. On the very worst days, the death toll in Constantinople alone may be as high as 10,000. Between a third and half the city's population perish. Entire households are wiped out. The city's graveyards overflow, and corpses are crammed into city watchtowers.
Between a third and half of the city's population. Think about your life. Imagine if either every 1 out of every 2 people you knew, or every 1 out of every 3 people you knew just died. Think about your family. Think about losing about half of your family members. I mean, this is catastrophic. This is an unimaginable level of death and destruction. You know, I don't even know how we would handle this even today. I mean, this is, you know, this is horrific, you know. I mean, yeah, there's honestly not much to say because it's an unimaginable level of death. It really is.
It was not easy in those times to see anyone out and about, for all were holed up in their homes. If you happened to chance upon someone going out, he was carrying one of the dead. All work came to a standstill. The plague hits the Empire's great cities hardest, but the pestilence also reaches deep into the countryside. Then Emperor Justinian himself falls sick.
Oh no.
News soon reaches the army in Syria. There are even rumors that the emperor is already dead. Belisarius and his generals discuss the situation, but we have no reliable information on what is said or by whom.
We can only speculate what they talked about. Did they talk about Belisarius taking the throne? Possibly. I mean, he may have been the man best suited for it in the Empire, but we can never know. We can never know how far Belisarius' ambition truly extended, or what those around him were encouraging him to do.
Justinian has no children. The succession will be an uncertain and dangerous time. Their own role may be decisive. They may even discuss who among them is best placed to succeed the emperor.
Yeah, maybe.
Unexpectedly, Justinian makes a full recovery. But Empress Theodora has learned of the generals' meeting in Syria. Her informers tell her that Belisarius and another general, Buzes, had said they would not support any new emperor proclaimed in Constantinople. Theodora regards these words as treason, a clear sign they will turn against her if her husband should die. Belisarius and Buzes are summoned to Constantinople for questioning. Theodora cannot prove their treason, but both men experience a sudden, dramatic fall from favor. Procopius claims that Buzes spends more than 2 years in a secret prison. Belisarius, the emperor's most successful general, escapes imprisonment, but his disgrace is total. He is dismissed from command and loses much of his fortune. His famed bucellari are split up and distributed amongst other commanders.
Man, I mean, we don't know what was discussed in that conversation, but you can't help but feel that Belisarius doesn't deserve this. I mean, think about all his service to the Empire and Justinian. I mean, he is Justinian's greatest asset. And, you know, if he was gonna make himself emperor, you think he would have done it already. I guess we don't know. We don't know what his ambitions truly were. We don't know what was discussed in that conversation, but I do feel bad for Belisarius. I feel like he's been nothing but loyal. He's tried his best, and he's succeeded, you know. He is a great general, and he's being punished. You know, perhaps unfairly. I guess we don't really know.
Belisarius lives in Constantinople as a private citizen for more than a year. While abroad, Justinian's empire slides towards crisis. The plague has killed a multitude of Roman citizens and soldiers, and severely disrupted government, trade, and taxation. In Armenia, a Roman offensive ends in humiliating defeat. In North Africa, Berber rebels defeat the Romans and kill Solomon the governor. While in Italy, the Ostrogoths have rallied under a new king, Totila, retaken most of Belisarius's gains, and again threaten Rome itself.
The Empire just does not have the resources to hold on to all of this gained territory, particularly with the plague. Of course, the question always arises, well, how successful would Justinian's conquests have been without the plague? You know, I still think that they were too ambitious and that the Empire did not have the resources to support them. But particularly with the plague, everything starts to really fall apart. And, I mean, without Belisarius. I mean, even with Belisarius being there, you know, he can't be everywhere at once. But it doesn't help that, you know, he has been stripped of his position.
Justinian is desperate for a general who can take command in Italy and turn the tide of war. 544 AD. Belisarius is recalled from disgrace and given back his old command in Italy.
There we go.
But the emperor has no troops to spare, and Belisarius's bucellari are still in the east. This time he will have only 4,000 recruits that he must hire and equip himself to reinforce the demoralized army in Italy. And in Totila, he faces a far more dangerous adversary than before. He is poorly resourced and has been ungratefully treated by his emperor. But Belisarius loyally marches to war again, in what will prove his final campaign.
Belisarius, loyal as always, going back to war for his emperor. He hasn't been rewarded thus so far. He's been treated pretty badly. His story is honestly amazing. I don't know if they've made a movie out of it, but it really is like movie material. It's so dramatic. You know, there's so much going on, so much drama, tension. It's a really great story, and Epic History TV has told it so well. We have one more episode left in this series that I'm really excited to get to, although I'm kind of sad that it's going to be over, because this has been a fantastic series of videos. They've done a great job presenting the information, making it entertaining, showing us visuals. It's all been really impressive. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I hope you guys did too. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and check out the Patreon. I hope to see you guys back for the next and last episode of this series on Belisarius. and I hope you guys are all having a good day. Goodbye.